In the 19th century, you will find two distinct strains of opera. These two strains are characterized by the composers Giuseppe Verdi and Richard Wagner, the latter of which we will talk about in the next lecture. Today's lecture, we'll talk about Verdi and his Italian counterparts. The 19th century opera is an extension of the Italianate style that we've been following from the Baroque to the Classical and into the Romantic. And the Verdian operas continue this strain. Wagner, on the other hand, is a new and distinct style. As you can see, Verdi is Italian, Wagner is German. The Italian style, especially at the beginning of the 19th century, is characterized by what is called the bel canto style, or beautiful singing. In this style, the voice, the singer, is the primary star. Wagner's operas were described by him and others as music drama, where the singer and the voice is no longer the most important aspect. The singer and the voice are equal with the orchestral instruments. We will talk about this more in the Wagner lecture. The plots in Verdi's operas are much more melodramatic, much more comic and buffa in style, whereas Wagner's operas are mythological in origins. Again, the structure in Verdi operas are very conservative, what we would expect, recitatives and arias, whereas Wagner's opera is sort of completely new in structure. And then their topics, again, very comic, very buffa in Verdian opera, but also can be serious at the same time. Wagner's operas are hardly ever comic. He only wrote one comic opera out of a handful of other serious operas. Now, Verdi is the continuation of a tradition that stretches back almost into the classical period. The bel canto style that we've been talking about is here at the beginning of the 19th century. It's characterized by three main composers. The first you may have heard of, Vincenzo Bellini. His most famous opera is I Puritani. The second is Donizetti and his famous opera Lucia di Lammermoor, and Gioacchino Rossini, Barber of Seville, and William Tell. Now, Bellini you may have heard of, although you might be more familiar, those of you who are 21, with the alcoholic beverage named after him. It's Prosecco and Peach, I believe. That was actually named after the painter Bellini, not the composer, but same name. Donizetti and Rossini. Rossini's works, you most probably familiar with, The Barber of Seville, is the same material as The Marriage of Figaro, the Mozart opera that we studied last term. The Barber of Seville and Marriage of Figaro are both based on plays by the French playwright Beaumarchais. This is a picture of Donizetti and the corpulent figure of Rossini. You're familiar with this song, I'm sure. So I'd be remiss if I didn't pass on a very famous story about Rossini. Near the end of his life, a friend came to visit, and Rossini was in his bed composing music, and there are pieces of paper, manuscript paper, strewn about the bed. And as his friend visited him, Rossini dropped a page that he was writing, and instead of getting out of the bed to pick up the piece of paper, Rossini decided to rewrite the entire manuscript of the opera that he was working on. Just goes to show the sort of laziness that he grew into at the end of his life. Now, Giuseppe Verdi is the continuation of this tradition, as we just mentioned before. Verdi is really the sort of father figure of Italian opera. his most famous operas you'll recognize arias from, and sort of entire operas, in fact. Now, during his lifetime, Verdi was used as a sort of political slogan, he and his name. The Risorgimento was an Italian movement of unification in the middle of the 19th century. Up until that point, Italy consisted of a series of city-states that did not unify under sort of an Italian banner. In the middle of the 19th century, this changed, and his name was used as an acronym. VERDI stood for Viva Victorio Emanuele Rex d'Italia. V for victory, E for Emmanuel, who was the figurehead of this movement. Rex is king, and of Italy. So Verdi's name and even his music were used as sort of rallying cries for this political movement. Politics also played a role in some of his other operas. In fact, his opera called The Masked Ball was banned by the censors because it dealt with the assassination of an aristocrat or a king, and the censors thought that this was too politically sensitive. So Verdi moved the setting from Sweden in sort of present day to the fair city of Boston in the 17th century. He thought that this removed enough of the taint of the assassination plot to make it past the censors, and it did. Now, probably the most famous aria from all of Verdi's operas is La Donna e Mobile from Rigoletto. Now, you'll have heard this most recently. It's been on TV and commercials for pasta. However, I'm not sure that those advertisers really knew what this aria is really about. The aria is sung by a duke, a rather womanizing duke, and the words literally are translated as, "Women are fickle." And the duke is talking about how easy it is for him to seduce women. So next time you hear that pasta commercial, wonder if the advertisers really knew what they were doing or not. Now, the opera that we will study in class is called La Traviata. We will talk about this more in class on Monday, but again, there are two very famous songs, one of which you might recognize, and both of which we will talk about in class coming up. Now, this Italian style is very much centered on stars and the prima donna singers and master tenors. The German style that we will discuss in the next lecture, completely opposite from this style. So it's something to keep in mind as we move forward.